Well, good morning, everybody. Hope you're all doing fantastically well. My name is Conor McGilligan, and we are back here with a rumour mill. It's going to be a bit of a walkabout this morning. Reason behind that, everybody? Well, does there have to be a reason behind that? They don't always have to be hour and a half long, 30-minute streams, do they? I just want to give you guys it short and concisely. Your Leeds United today's news, and we've got a bit to talk about every day. Haven't we, throughout this international break, so hopefully that's going to keep you guys entertained. We have got the return of Battle Lines this evening, which will be scheduled on the channel in due course, everybody, so make sure you're tuning in at 7 p.m. Myself and Jimmy are going to be going over everything. It's probably going to be a bit of an in-depth going over everything when it comes to Sheffield United, when it comes to Leeds, but going over the Premier League as well. I know Jimmy's been keeping a keen eye on it as well, and where Leeds are at and what he thinks as well. So tune in for that, everybody. And if you haven't already, make sure you go check out White Noise from last night. It was a pre-record again, but it was an excellent show. Brown was on top form and it was making me laugh as well. So make sure you check that one out, everybody. But we're back here talking about the Mighty Whites this morning. And what I wanted to speak about today is, well, there's a few things to speak about Buonanotte and his comments today. We've also got to touch on Tanaka, interesting comments. And I've noticed a lot of them do this when they're on international break, when they're asked about minutes. And obviously he is one of the key pawns in that Japanese national side. Him and Mitoma are best mates. He said that already as well in an interview last week. And when asked about why they're not playing, or they're quizzed why you're not playing, and it is quite direct and quite blunt abroad. Why are you not playing for the your local team? Does it affect your national team performance? Because sometimes it feels playing abroad for some of these teams is way more, for some of these players, is way more important than what it is for our players and playing for England. That's how it feels anyway. But we're going to be touching on Tanaka. We're going to be touching as well on Largie Ramazani and his situation and his maybe lack of playing time. So let's touch on the latter anyway, and how is Ramazani doing on loan watch? Well, he's had the impact of that first game against Getafe, where he came off the bench and it was brilliant, monstrous. He looked really decent, had 3 or 4 passages of play in and around 5 or 6 minutes, and looked really, really good, really bright. And obviously got his goal contribution, didn't he? And you're thinking to yourself, wow, this impact's going to be huge. And sometimes you have to take a step back and look at the standard again. It is La Liga. And it's a very similar notion, a very similar rhetoric with Matteo Joseph and it being La Liga. And going from the Championship to La Liga is a massive step up. Not as gargantuan as going from the Championship to the Premier League, of course, but it is La Liga's it's the second best league in the world. So going there is going to be a bit of an adaptation. Obviously, he was formerly off there, wasn't he, at Almeria? He's gone to Leeds United, then he's gone back. So the standard difference is so vast when it comes to Largie Ramazani, but you're expecting him to adapt to that level. And Leeds were probably thinking the same thing with Matteo Joseph, presumably. Spanish under-21. Has effectively acclimatised to probably the personnel that he's playing with, but it is an under-21 level. It is not a senior level of which he's been playing for Spain. It's not. So that is the context. But his games have been sparse, his minutes have been sparse, and when you're looking at Ramazani so far, he is that impact sub for Valencia. That's exactly what he is. He's nothing more or nothing less. And he's mentioned a couple of quotes today saying that he's learning a lot under Carlos Corberán. He really likes the manager. He's going to continue to try and improve. And you do look at it and think to yourself, is there going to be a bit of a breakthrough there? If Largie was to go, and obviously there's no obligation to buy or option to buy there, but if Largie's to go and to really, signify that he is a very decent player and he's able to get some assists and goals, it's just going to put him in really good stead for Leeds United next season. And our loan players just haven't, the ones that have come straight back to the club just haven't really developed. I mean, even Isaac Schmidt's apparently not been included in the squad a lot in Germany, but now there's an injury to a fullback. It looks like Schmidt's going to be playing. Max Verber is injured. And obviously, when you look at Verber and Schmidt, they're going to be moving on with that obligation. But if they were to come back to Leeds, again, they don't look like they're pulling up trees. And it does kind of, you look back at recruitment and think to yourself, well, have these been the most positive signings, even if they've not been playing? And a lot of people in the comments will say, well, Farke was right. Farke was right with these players, 100%. But I do think there's a lot of context in, players' confidence as well, and the rustiness and the match sharpness, and being able to get back to that level again will be extremely difficult when you've been on the bench for the majority of, the previous season, in a lower division. But there is also the balancing act when it comes to Farke, that Farke was right, and these players can't acclimatise. And when you look at Ramazani, at this moment in time, that impact sub that we're used to seeing when it comes to Largie, and his quote saying, look, he's got to bide his time recently, he's got to bide his time, he's going to get there, he's going to continue working hard. Feels like it's taking time for our loan players to really get into the swing of things, and that's the big thing right now. And they're only young, 23, 24 though. Largie Ramazani, he's going to start, obviously, there's going to be pressure on him to start making an impact very soon. So looking at Tanaka anyway, who's been speaking recently to Goal out in Japan, Tanaka was saying, interestingly enough, that he's very almost like awestruck, or awe-stricken, I should say, by the level difference. And he said even when you're watching it, which is quite an interesting perspective from Tanaka, even when you're watching it on the bench, he said the level is so much different to what it was. And he said he's disappointed, and it follows what Yaka was saying yesterday. He's disappointed with the minutes that he's been getting, but he understands it's for the greater good of the team, which is good for these players. I'm happy they've been saying that, because you've kind of got to have that balancing act of being upset, but knowing that you have to work you're gonna have to work yourself into the ground to get back into the team. And you're looking at that level difference and you're thinking to yourself, yeah, that is stark from the Championship. What I would say though is, I think Tanaka, if I'm out Tanaka and I'm not playing up against Burnley, I'm raging. I really am. I think this is the perfect game for Al Tanaka. We were talking at the very start of the season about certain players being picked for certain matches. Leeds need to have physicality, they need to have athleticism, they need to have that stature in some of these games. But what Leeds also need to have is the technical ability and the touch, the guile, the deep playmaker ability in some of these games to be able to maybe unlock a Burnley who are going to be sat in some sort of mid to low block. So I think someone like Tanaka coming in is something that has to happen against Burnley. I'd be taking Anton Stack out. I'd be putting, obviously Stack's still got his injury as well, his finger injury. I don't know how long that's going to continue for, but does Stack need a break? It's not great that he needs a break after less than 10 games, but he is looking leggy at the minute. I feel like he's looking leggy. His stats are really good, in terms of like chance creation, tackles, all this sort of stuff, but I would be keeping Sean Longstaff in there, because I think Longstaff's been brilliant. I think Tanaka's form has been a bit on and off, and for me, what I will be doing is bringing Tanaka back in for both of these games. I think you have Longstaff in there. I think you have obviously Ethan Ampadu in there, and if there's a little bit of a struggle when it comes to maybe the physicality, you can bring Stack on. But I think those physical tendencies will be put into motion by the other two. And I think you've seen with Longstaff's tackle rate, which is the second highest in the Premier League. You've seen with Ampadu just generally how physical he is. I don't think we need a third body in there who, and it's no disrespect to Stack, because he's more of a player than this. He's more of a player, of course he is. But I don't think you need a third body. And the excuse for that is, we need someone who's tall and physical and combative and all this sort of stuff. I think, you've got to keep Longstaff in there for that set piece delivery, of course, but I think you need someone in there, for me, who's a better footballer. I think Tanaka is a better footballer than Anton Stack. I think Tanaka's a better footballer than all of them. So I think you need that technical level, and we mentioned at the beginning of the season that he has to come in for certain games, maybe lower league games, of which that physical impact's not going to be that obvious. And I think in the game the other day, unlike Bournemouth, when he was given a little bit more time, I think he comes in and he makes way more of an impact. I think Tanaka is the player of which we're all looking at now and thinking at some stage he's got to come in, and this is going to be a selection headache for Daniel Farke, in my opinion. Anton Stack, who he clearly loves, and he's mentioned it several times how much he loves him, or out Tanaka, but I don't think there's that much of a risk putting Tanaka in, to be honest with you. And even against West Ham, especially at home, I'd be going with Tanaka. Buonanotte has been speaking to Sussex World and London, or Sussex Live and London World, and he's been saying, basically, amid the interest, he was posed a question. There were clubs in fear, I think Leeds were mentioned as well, and he just said, when Chelsea are there, how can you say no? And I get that to a certain level. Obviously the club champions, all this sort of stuff. I think the more annoying thing is the fact that Chelsea were there anyway. It's like, guys, why do you need another little diminutive central attacking midfielder, you know, who's good between the lines? But anyway, Buonanotte chose Chelsea, but he's been saying today, or last night I should say, that how can you say no to Chelsea even when the other offer's on the table, which is obviously referring to Leeds United. Now, Herzler at Brighton has also said that they won't be selling him. He's on loan, isn't he, at this moment in time? And he said, Herzler said they are not going to be selling him. They want to keep a hold of him. So it looks like that door is firmly shut for Leeds United. That's how it feels anyway. There's not going to be any sort of deal that's going to get done later on down the line. I think Brighton are big fans of him. I mean, he's not even been included in the Champions League squad, so it makes absolutely no sense from Facundo Buonanotte's side. He's not been playing regularly in the Premier League either. It just doesn't make any sense to me, and it is frustrating because he'd have been perfect for us. But I think once again, with what Buonanotte is saying and how Leeds went to the back end of that window, it has made me think again that once you just cannot avoid going and doing something. And if you do avoid going and doing something in January, it's pure neglect. And it's not been, I think it's interesting when you look at like Rangers and that word neglect, and how the Rangers fans have been talking about the new ownership. And obviously it's not just the 49ers involved in that with Kavanagh and co, but they've been talking about neglect from the board and how long this has taken when it comes to sacking Russell Martin, and how that's really affected their season. Obviously it's affected them in Europe, and the length it's taken, according to Rangers fans, for this guy to be sacked. Now, once again, the reason that is relevant is because I mentioned yesterday on the rumour mill that in January it really took them a long time, last January, to do anything. And apparently we were in for Gus Hamer and that didn't quite work out. And when you look at it, like, I thought we were fine. I mentioned this yesterday when it came to January. I thought Leeds were absolutely fine. It is what it is. You move on. You've got a good enough team. But the whole point is, right now, the 49ers have to be reactive to Leeds United. They have to be, not even reactive, it's proactive. They've got to be proactive going into that January market. I don't care where we are. I don't care. I mean, Beren Cross was saying the other day, like, he doesn't, for The Athletic, he said that he doesn't feel that Leeds are in any sort of peril at this moment in time, and he doesn't feel like, effectively, I'm paraphrasing, but he doesn't feel like we're relegation candidates, which I think is nonsense. I think Leeds are, but I think if you are proper owners, you have to invest, especially with the noise that happened in the summer. I think Leeds are going to need help, especially after the December period that we have, which is going to be really, really difficult. There's a real good feeling around Leeds right now, but we are 15th. We are 15th. You know, we're only 4 points above that relegation spot with, you know, the likes of Villa, who've won 4 on the bounce. West Ham seem to be steadily improving. Wolves haven't been beaten in 3. And you get these teams in around the bottom who could just put these wins together. They can just put these wins together, you know. And it sounds crazy, but, you know, Wolves go to Sunderland, and we've seen this multiple times with the promoted sides. But if Wolves go to Sunderland and win, Wolves then go to like 5 points. That's them right back into it. And they are rock bottom without a hope. But there is so many almost like El Clasico-esque games when we get back. It is massive. Leeds, Burnley, Sunderland, Wolves, Brentford have got a couple of huge ones. West Ham have got 2 massive games as well. So it's a really, really key period for Leeds United. But what we can't lose sight of is January being a massive month for Leeds United, especially if we're in touch. So guys, let me know what you think in the comment section below. I'm Conor McGilligan. We're going to be back this evening with Battle Lines. See you then. Like, comment, subscribe.